Hey everyone, my name is Penny Zanker, and it's time to reset. This podcast goes beyond just navigating change. It's about new ways of thinking about how you can approach challenges, how you can shift your mindset when needed, create some space and grace for yourself so that you can rethink, recharge, and reprioritize when and where needed. Are you ready to unlock your full potential? Thank you for hitting play and sharing this next episode with me. It's time to reset. Hello, welcome to Take Back Time. My name is Penny Zanker and I'm your host. And I'm always looking for something interesting, something new. Anyway, I'm looking for interesting products and people to challenge you. And today is no exception. I am super excited to have Rohan Dixit here, and he is founder and CEO of Lief Therapeutics. It's a digital mental health company that's built around a breakthrough wearable device. Formerly, he is a Harvard and a Stanford neuroscientist, so that must all go into the product, which is very, very interesting. And his work has been featured on The Today Show, CNBC, The Atlantic, Rolling Stone, NBC, CBS, and Forbes magazine. So without further ado, Rohan, welcome to the show.
So great to be here.
So I'm a big fan. We were just talking about it a little bit beforehand. I'm a big fan of new inventions and devices and things that can really support us to be at our best, right? So sometimes it's a way of thinking, and sometimes it is some sort of a wearable that can help us to get grounded or get better sleep or to just have some greater awareness with the feedback that we get that it's collecting. Tell me a little bit about the before the product. Like, what gave you the idea? Was there some sort of pivotal moment that happened in your life that you said, this is something that we need to have?
Yeah, my journey kind of started as a teenager dealing with stress and anxiety and depression, myself. And my mom is a big meditator, and she had a book about meditation lying around the house. And I stumbled upon the book. I read it, started trying it out a little bit, and it helped me a lot. It kind of gave me an even keel and made a big impact in my life at a pivotal time. And so I thought at that moment something must have changed in my brain, and dedicated my life to understanding that more and helping other people find it too. So then I was a neuroscientist, as you mentioned, studying meditation, mindfulness, different states of consciousness. What makes us human? How do we control our emotional state? Where do our emotions come from? And yeah, that all kind of led to Lief.
That's pretty cool. We could have some other really super interesting conversations as well. I'll save some of those questions for a little bit later, because I love to understand also how we can control our emotions and in a way that can bring out the best in us and not have us sort of get hijacked, right? Emotionally hijacked, because that's happening for a lot of people today. So it's very real. Burnout is one way that I feel is, and maybe this is a good question for you. I feel that there is a very large component that comes from our thinking that is burnout driven. What's your thought about that? Is it all physical and it's just that we've worn our adrenaline out, or where does the emotional side and the thinking side come into play?
It's this fascinating question that I think we've been trying to figure out for 100 years. What makes us who we are? How does our mind work? Where do our emotions really come from? There was a famous psychologist, a Harvard psychologist named William James, who started a lot of the reasoning that eventually led to things like biofeedback and our company and many others. And that viewpoint basically says that your emotional state is, yes, it's mediated by your mind, by your brain, let's say. So in between your ears, it's up here. I was a neuroscientist. We were always studying the brain, never looking anywhere else. But what William James kind of posited and what others have then followed up on and done a lot of research now into is what's known as the autonomic nervous system, the nervous system of our body. So our nerves are concentrated obviously in our brain, a lot of neurons in the brain. People will have heard that word. But those nerves spread throughout our entire physical body. They control things like our heart rate, when our palms are sweaty, when we start to have these reactions, let's say to stress, anxiety, even depression. All of those can be measured in the body. And it turns out that our emotional state is not just our thoughts, but it's actually our body's reaction to those thoughts. And it's in a feedback loop with our mind. And so yeah, it turns out that if you learn to, for example, examine your thoughts a lot, you go see a therapist, they might do something called CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. What are they doing in CBT? They're analyzing the way that you think about things. They're analyzing the mental constructs you might have, and maybe some of the distortions you might have around how you perceive events and how those relate to you. And so they're really focused on the mind, but what they're doing is trying to tinker with your perception of things.
Mm-hmm.
Biofeedback, which is this incredible technology, it was born in the 60s and 70s, and I describe it as almost a superpower. And it's really what Lief is based around, biofeedback. That technology really focuses on the body. And so because our mind and our body are in this feedback loop, if you intervene either at the mind through, let's say, therapy, CBT, other techniques, or at the level of the body by, say, controlling your heart rate, your breathing, things like that, you can make a big difference in how you feel.
So it's the whole, to simplify everything that you just said so beautifully, that our body influences our mind and our mind influences our body.
Yeah, that was a lot shorter way to say it.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands it, right? Because we do have different ways to mental health. And I think that it's important that people understand that there's not only one way to do it, right? So this biofeedback is really interesting. So tell us about, how does this biofeedback work, let's say in context of your instrument that you have?
Yeah. And so even if you'll allow this, taking a little bit of a step back, right? For those who are totally unfamiliar with biofeedback, it's really important to, I think, understand why this is worth your time as a listener, right? Why should you care about feedback? So the original biofeedback experiments, right, which are more than 50 years old, were looking at fingertip temperature. Those are some of the earliest experiments. So what they would do is they would take a group of people in. This is a scientific study. They broke the group into two halves, and they said, everyone on the right side of the room, let's say, I want you to raise the temperature of your fingertip. And everyone on the left side of the room, I want you to lower the temperature of your fingertip, which is impossible, right? We have no conscious control for our fingertip temperature.
I was waiting for the answer of that. Maybe I could if I wished it, if I was like warmer.
And obviously that almost seems comical, but it turns out you can actually kind of will yourself to change your fingertip temperature on demand. You just need two things. And this is the key to biofeedback. This is the secret for how this technology works, as far as we do understand it, which is not completely understood, to be very frank with you. But these are the two things you need. You need an accurate sensor. So it's measuring something about your autonomic nervous system, the nervous system in your body. For example, your fingertip temperature, it's controlled by your autonomic nervous system. For these people in this early experiment, they were measuring.
What's the second thing?
Yeah. So first thing, measurement, right? Accurate digital thermometer. And the second thing is it's got to be real time. Anytime we're learning something, right? Particularly where you're learning to control something you can't really even see or feel, or you're it's almost like this invisible arm that you have that's in a space behind you you can't see. Like, how do you learn how to control that? How do you learn how to move it?
I've seen that exercise. There's an exercise like that too, right? Where it's a fake arm that's there. And if somebody hits it, that their body reacts because they see it.
Yeah, that's another common cognitive neuroscience experiment. But so similar sort of concept, but basically what you're teaching your body to do and teaching your brain to do is learn how to control a signal that maybe you don't fully understand how it's happening, but you're just kind of looking, in this case of your fingertip temperature, at a digital thermometer. It's clipped to your fingertip, and little fractions of a degree, they're going up and down. And you're just trying, you're just willing it to go up. And most of the time you fail. But after a few hours of training, you actually can learn how to move it up and down with your willpower. And that's biofeedback. It's this superpower over things about your body you thought were completely unconscious.
Right. I want to challenge you on something. You said you can do it with your willpower. Did you use that word?
I use the word willpower. Yeah.
I want to challenge that. And sometimes I do here on the show. Willpower. I'm thinking from some of the things that I've done and learned that I could say, okay, I could imagine that I'm sticking my finger in boiling hot water, right? Am I willing it by saying I'm going to take it from a 0 to a 10 by, using a scale and using some specific techniques to do that? Is that willpower or is that something else?
Another way to phrase it, and this is how the science would talk about it, is voluntary and involuntary, or conscious and unconscious processing. What we're talking about typically when you're putting your finger into a glass of water or a boiling pot is voluntary, is conscious processing, right?
Right. I'm intentionally setting up a construct to influence. I'm just curious. I'm not saying that, no, it's not willpower. Most people, when they think of willpower, they think of, I'm not going to go eat that donut, right? And we know that it's exhaustible. And so I just want to make sure that people aren't getting confused. So I think that'll work for me so that I feel like everybody understands that we're talking like a conscious process to get to an end result that we're looking for.
Yeah. And I think maybe to riff on the tack that you were taking, it feels like when you're consciously doing something, you are explicitly making a plan to move your body in a certain direction, let's say, as opposed to an unconscious thing that's like, for example, your heartbeat typically is unconscious. You're not consciously thinking like, okay, like, let me beat now, let me beat now, I'm going to beat my heart one more time, right? It's like this unconscious process that's happening. And so
Right.
what's interesting is actually our body, maybe we should use the term conscious and unconscious processing because that's more, I think, true to what's happening.
Yeah, I
It's
like
kind of
that.
a Venn diagram. Yeah. But what's interesting is that with the Venn diagram, you've got the intersection, right? So you've got
Mhm.
things that are completely involuntary. So that's like a lot of the bodily process that you have running all the time, all the cellular metabolism you got going on in your body, all of that kind of stuff. You've got things that are really conscious. That's you deciding, like, I'm going to ask this question. I'm going to turn on the Zoom. I'm going to schedule a meeting for this time. So all of that is conscious. There's a space in between things that are both conscious and unconscious. And part of what I studied at Stanford and Harvard were meditation and meditators and how they learn how to change their body and their brain. And a lot of that has to do with that in between space. And
Mhm.
typically we'll start with the breath because the breath is actually the perfect example of something you can do that is both unconscious.
Mhm.
Oftentimes we're not thinking about breathing, but I promise we're still breathing. You're
Right.
not choking on not having enough air, but you can also consciously breathe. You can also consciously say, I'm going to take a deep breath in now and deep breath out. So a lot of times breath is actually kind of the input, the entry point to a lot of people's experience of this in between space and learning to actually gain conscious control over what's unconscious in their body.
Mhm.
And biofeedback is a way of entering that middle space as well, where it's giving you visual feedback, auditory feedback in the case of our device, which is this patch that measures your heart rate. It's giving you vibration feedback, pattern of vibration. But no matter what you're feeling or hearing or seeing, you're learning to tap into that and then over time start to control it.
Okay. I love the way you explain that. And I think a Venn diagram gives people who are just listening, right, or watching, gives them that visual as so really, really clear. I love that. Okay. So that's sort of understanding the why behind the biofeedback, right? And you mentioned some of the different ways that it gives us information.
Right.
How does it do that? So you've got this wearable, I think you put it on your chest, right?
It's a patch. Yep. Leaf is a smart patch that's measuring your heart rate and it's basically feeding it back to you in real time through a
Does it
pattern of
matter where it is on your body?
yeah, so there's a specific location on your
Okay.
body where it should go. We have two versions of the product. We have FDA class 2 medical device version, which is covered by most insurance plans, needs to be prescribed to you by a doctor. And we have a consumer version that you can get that's more focused on wellness, general wellness.
Gotcha.
And yeah, on your torso, it's measuring this signal of your body, which is your heart rate, and it's feeding it back to you in real time. So just like people learning to control their fingertip temperature by watching a digital thermometer go up and down and basically learning to consciously control what was unconscious, we teach people to gain conscious control over their own heart rates, such that after a few weeks of training with Lief, you will be able to, as you breathe in and out, move your heart rate up and down 20 or 30 beats per minute as you're breathing up and down and inhaling and exhaling. And that kind of dramatic physiological shift is kind of like the superpower part of biofeedback.
So let me ask you, this is a selfish question. So you mentioned yourself as a young adult having some anxiety and some challenges like that. So my kids have challenges with anxiety and sometimes they feel like they can't breathe, right? When I ask them to do some breath work, let's try to do something, they say, no, it's hard for me to breathe. Somebody has that type of anxiety. With this type of training, would that support them even though they feel like they can't breathe? Would that give them that a leg up to get some control over this problem with not breathing?
Gosh, yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, but I think it's hard to say. So sometimes difficulty breathing can be a physical process or a viral process, right? But if it's more mediated by, let's say, an anxiety attack, a panic attack, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have many friends and a lot of our customers who struggle with panic attacks. So the way that a panic attack oftentimes happens, and people who struggle with this will know, is you kind of feel it coming on a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There's like this prodrome phase, almost like an epileptic seizure, similar thing,
Right.
right?
I'll liken it to a hot flash. I understand. I know exactly when it's coming on.
And it's before it gets really bad, right? And so where a tool like a Leaf can be really helpful, a biofeedback tool, it's continuous and wearable and always giving you feedback on how you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And just without buying anything, mindfulness, right? Learning to pay attention to your body, which can be
Mm-hmm.
hard, but it's such a valuable skill.
Right.
What that tells you how to do and what that teaches you to do is to recognize the beginning phases before you're in a full blown, let's say, panic attack. And
Mm-hmm.
in that beginning phase, if you intervene at that time, and this is what the Lief teaches you to do, we measure something called heart rate variability, HRV. This is this incredible biomarker. It seems to be a biomarker of mental health. And if it's really, really low, that's typically a sign that you are much more at risk for anxiety, even depression, substance use, PTSD symptoms, all of that, right? And so what you can do and what I would recommend exploring with your
Mm-hmm.
children is, first of all, learning to slow down and feel and notice when your body's starting to shift. Like, do you notice when your palms start sweating a little bit? That's a signal. Let's slow
Mm-hmm.
down. Let's pay attention to our
Mm-hmm.
body. Let's listen to ourselves. Do you notice when your heart starts to beat a little faster? Maybe you get flush. Like, those are autonomic nervous system signals that you can learn to notice. And so when you
Right.
notice, then the next step would be, now let's breathe in a very particular way to try to shift that state.
Mm-hmm.
And what Lief does is something called HRV, heart rate variability biofeedback. And we're essentially using our breath to move our heart rate in such a way that it sort of tricks your brain into calming down. And that's really the trick.
Okay.
It's that feedback loop you were talking about between the mind and the body.
Very interesting. I've heard people tell me if this is that you're doing kind of a nervous system reset.
That's right. Good.
Okay. I like that language, because I'm also working on a new book called Reset Moments, or codename Reset Moments, something like that, to talk about how exactly kind of that a reset moment is recognizing the signals, right? Slowing down to recognize the signals. They might be emotional signals. They might be someone else's emotional signals that they need help or they need support. I think that we have a challenge that we're all too distracted, moving too fast, too busy, too engaged elsewhere, that we're not listening to the signals. It was bad before. It's gotten much worse that we ignore them, right? We just continue to do whatever we're doing and push it under the table. How do you deal with that? You've got this device, but let's say people aren't going to buy it because they're like, it's not really a problem. I'm just brushing it under the table. How do we create more of these reset moments for them to recognize it and take action and have a wearable that gives them more feedback?
Sometimes it takes a disaster or a catastrophe for people to really start to focus on their health, unfortunately.
Oh, I hate that. That's so stupid.
Yeah, the smart thing to do would be, I'm struggling with this myself, and this is my story as well. I never really thought about my health or my mental health until things started to break down. That's just how human beings are. I think the smarter ones amongst us, I'm not in that group, but those are folks who can say, look, I'm looking at the research. I know the science says I need to take care of my physical body. I need to take care of my mind. It's going to give me a longer, healthier life. It's going to mean I'm nicer to my family, to my kids, to my coworkers, to myself. I will be in a much better place if I take the time to progressively do the practice and the work that I need to make myself a better human.
Better human. Let's connect this now also to productivity, right? People are listening because they want to take back time. They want to work smarter. Do you have any studies or any information that shows how, when people are able to lower their stress and be more grounded in this way, or that they're able to see the difference in the productivity and the clarity of thinking and those types of things?
Interesting story. There was a study that was done on traders in the city in London, which is a lot of these financial services folks who are making fast decisions, right? Prices going up, prices going down. You're trying to figure out when to sell, when do I buy? And what they did was they measured these people's ability to interocept. If your audience, maybe haven't come across interoception as a term before, it's basically this ability of your mind to feel what's happening inside your physical body. For example, your heart beating. So what they asked these folks to do is they hooked them up to a machine, kind of like a Lief, EKG machine. It's measuring the rate very accurately. And they said, all right, I just want you to tap out on the table right here. Tap, 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 tap when you think your heart's beating. Okay. That's interoception test. How well are you able to feel what's happening inside you? And what they found was that for the traders who were able to interocept better, if you could tell what was going on in your body, you were aware of that more, you tended to make more money. And so what is the lesson in that anecdote or in that study? It's not just that because I'm more mindful of what's happening inside of me, that I'm maybe less reactive, or maybe I'm a little nicer to people, or maybe I don't say something that I end up regretting later. It could be the case that it ends up making you more money too, and helping you be a more productive person.
Drop the mic, right? And it helped them to make more money because they could make better decisions, right? So, because that's what their whole job is making decisions. And really, we're all making those decisions. If we can make better decisions and faster, better decisions, of course, we're going to be more productive.
Absolutely.
And we're going to be happier when we're more productive, because then hopefully we'll also be able to do what I said, is to take back time, right? If we can accomplish things in less time that we're looking to accomplish, and be able to do that in a less stressful way. So that is possible.
It is. And I think, you nailed it with this idea of the reset and the pause, right? It's like, how do you actually build that skill though? Because in that study with the traders, they just have this ability, right? People have different abilities and we're all on a bell curve, but how do you get better? And that's where for Lief, for this product, this thing that I invented, mostly for myself, to be honest with you, and then turned out to help other people. That's like a nice benefit. But the reason that I really wanted this for me was like, how do you really train interoception? How do you train mindfulness? How do you train self-regulation? You need something that's almost like with you throughout the day, knows when you most need help, and intervenes at that exact moment, gives you feedback so you can do something. Because typically you're not aware. That's the whole problem. You don't know that there's an issue, right? And so you can't address it. So what the Lief does is it creates these reset moments throughout your day, which we call doses. And those little doses will happen when your heart rate variability, this biomarker of mental health, stress, is very low. And the device will turn on, will start vibrating. You breathe with it. And as your HRV gets back into a good range, it'll just turn itself off. You get these little reset moments throughout the day at the right time. And doing that day over day, you start to build the skill of self-regulation.
Yes. How do I don't have a biofeedback to help people recognize their own, let's say, triggers, right? But this is interesting, right? I could see this as being interesting for companies that are looking to help their people, their leaders, implement more reset moments, right? Be better leaders, to just train them first, right? Through this biofeedback, just to be professional noticers. That's what we need to do, is learn how to be professional noticers so that we notice these things, whether it's for ourselves. But I would imagine, and I don't know if you have any studies on this, the more we notice those types of things, our heart rate, right? The more we notice other things, right? The more we notice and slow down to notice what's going on around us, so that we can take that in. And then what I say is, then we go through a reset practice, just to step back, get some perspective on it. What do we need to do next? What are our options? And then to realign with the best next step. You know, it sounds like this is a really cool tool to help you become a professional noticer. I'll come back to the question. I just got so excited. Do you have any studies that show that people start to notice other things in their life?
There's an interesting study that came out of UC, was it UCSD? No, UC Santa Barbara. And this was a few years ago, but it looked at couples, right? So couples that have been in a long-term relationship, and they were measuring their heart rate again. And to your point about noticing, right? Noticing other things around you and using that to change your actions. What they were measuring was really when you're looking into your partner's eyes and it's just the two of you, it turns out that your heart rates will actually start to synchronize.
Oh, to sync up. Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's this kind of ability. And you can kind of tell when you're with somebody, let's say, and you kind of notice maybe they're getting a little more upset, or maybe they're even relaxing, whichever direction their emotional state's going. If you can intuit that, you can use it to meet them better and to guide the conversation in a different way and all of that, right? And so that ability that you apply to yourself in interoception, you can apply to other people and use that to actually build stronger social bonds.
Right. And to influence people, right? To bring them to a calmer state, right? You could take somebody who's in a difficult state and you can help to bring them down by matching their breathing. Isn't that mirror neurons though, or is this somewhat similar?
Yeah. So the mirror neuron thing is a little bit of pop science, but there's some underlying truth to that metaphor, which is like, monkey see, monkey do. When you're watching somebody in their state, it can affect you as well. And one of the ways that one of our earliest clinical users of Lief actually used our product was in couples counseling. So you would have this pair of two partners, and they're sitting and they're talking about, let's say, a stressful situation. And this goes back to, I think, some of the work that some of the early relational psychologists did decades ago, looking at heart rate reactivity when you're, say, recounting a fight that you might have had, like recently with your partner in the context of this session. And what this clinician would do is basically monitor when one partner or the other's heart rate variability started to get into a danger zone. And then it kind of just acts like a stop, like a red light, like, okay, let's pause. Let's not continue. Let's breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get back into a good zone. And then we'll continue what we were doing. You can use these abilities to connect with people better and to also avoid maybe having conversations where you're very triggered and activated and maybe things don't go the way that you would want them to.
Right. So interesting. So excited to play around, and so many interesting studies that I'd like to see how that affects this and that and the other thing. So I'm sure we'll connect on that on the side. But thank you for all that you've shared so far. I just have two last questions and then we'll wrap up the show. So one is, I like to ask everybody this question, and I love how everybody has a different answer. What is your definition of productivity and why?
My definition of productivity is doing what you set out to do in the time you set out to do it. And I say that maybe instead of knocking a bunch of work out every day as being activity, because some days or some times in a day, you don't want to be productive. And my goal is not to have output. It's to slow down. It's to relax. It's to let go. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Right. And that's productive, right? So, that's why I get so many different definitions. Some people feel like it's do. That is what is the definition of productivity, right? Some people talk about just the output. So it's all over the place. So it's all good, right? There's no answer. I think that productivity is really a byproduct of focusing on the things that matter most. So
yeah, agree.
So anyway, what didn't I ask you that you think people need to know before we end the show?
I think you covered so much of this space, and this is a deep, deep topic, right? Scientists working on a lot of these technologies still, and it's a new type of wearable. It's a new type of tool that hasn't been around for people for very long. I think one thing that might be interesting for people to just ponder and ask themselves as a question is, if I could be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more calm, a little bit more focused, a little bit more present, maybe 10%, what would that mean for my life? What would the impact be on your life? And I think that's a question that's worth, thinking about for any of us.
Absolutely. And we'd be willing to test it and see what kind of difference it could make in our lives. The only way to know is to test it.
We're sending you one, so would love to.
No. I know, but I'm saying for everybody who's listening, right? I'm going to test it and I'm going to talk about it. What's the amount of time that you think, so that also I'll engage in that test and then I'll share it with the listeners, but so that they know, like, okay, I hear you, Rohan, I'm going to test it. What's the time frame that you feel is a good test? Is it something like 30 days or would we see a result faster?
Yeah, so we did a clinical trial that we published in the AAPB, which is a neuroscience journal, and basically taking people, this was focused on anxiety, but similar type of thing, where it's using biofeedback over a course of a couple of months. And that's usually the right amount of time because you really, depending on where you're starting, you may need a little more help or a little less. And so I tell people 8 weeks so that they have a realistic, practical thing in their mind as to what it's going to take to see a change.
Great. I did come up with one additional question. You can keep it short, but there's a lot of people thinking about AI and how AI is affecting everything. Is AI going to have an impact? Like, what does your future product look like with AI?
Yeah, we're experimenting with that a little bit internally, nothing that's public yet. But I think what would be really interesting is, you think if you had the ability to know how you were feeling in real time and you wanted to talk to someone about it, which you can never really do with therapists, right? You're only in the therapy session like maybe once a week or once every couple of weeks.
You need it in the moment.
You need it in the moment. So how might you use something like that to help you?
Cool. That sounds really cool. And that sounds like it would be a huge benefit for so many people. So I'd love to see that.
This has been so fun. Thank you so much, Benny. This has been great.
Yeah. Tell us where people can reach you and buy the product.
Yeah. Our website is getlief, GETLIEF.com. You can find us there. And any questions, we are on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of the places. Shoot us a message or an email anytime. We're happy to talk, happy to chat. Even if you just want to kind of see if the product's right for you, or you have questions related to anything that we talked about today, we'd love to connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You too. Take care.
And thank you all for being here. Basically, right, you've got a chance. You've got a chance to become a professional noticer, to have reset moments throughout the day that can help to regulate you so that you can be calmer, be more focused, and be more present and productive. Who doesn't want that, right? So you can be more productive and more calm at the same time, right? Try it out. 8 weeks of a wearable just to make yourself a professional noticer, and you can maybe have a little journal and identify what have you noticed in that period that's changed? How are you more present? How are you more calm? Give it a try, right? These are things that we need to do for ourselves. Please, please, please don't wait until you have a health problem to decide that you need to do something like this. Do it now and see the benefit and just be happier and live longer. That's all I really want for everybody. So thank you all for being here. My name is Penny Zenker, and this is Take Back Time. We'll see you in the next episode. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me. It really means a lot. If you're feeling a little off, distracted, overwhelmed, stuck, or just out of sync, remember that's your signal to reset. And that's all it takes, just recognizing one reset moment at a time. So stay tuned for more tips, tools, tricks, stories, strategies, all here on Time to Reset. We'll see you in the next episode.